In 1966, something happened at Le Mans that had never happened before. Three cars crossed the finish line almost simultaneously. First place, second place, third place. All three were Fords. Ferrari, the most dominant racing team on the planet, watched from the pit lane in silence. The team that had defined European motorsport for a decade. The team that had made Le Mans their personal trophy case. Standing there, watching American machines take everything they had built. They had won Le Mans 6 consecutive times. They had broken lap records, destroyed rivals, and turned the Circuit de la Sarthe into something that felt like their private property. They had never lost like this, and they never forgot it. This is the story of the Ford GT40. The car built for one reason and one reason only, to destroy Ferrari on the biggest stage in motorsport. And it did exactly that, 4 times in a row. 2 men, 2 empires, 1 collision. To understand the GT40, you have to understand the 2 men at the center of this story. Henry Ford II, known as Hank the Deuce, took over Ford Motor Company in 1945 at the age of 28. His grandfather, Henry Ford, had built the company. His father, Edsel, had died young. Henry II inherited a business that was losing $10 million a month. He turned it around. By the 1960s, Ford was one of the most powerful industrial companies on earth. But Henry II had a problem that money couldn't fix: prestige. Across the Atlantic, Enzo Ferrari was a completely different kind of man. Enzo didn't think of himself as a businessman, he thought of himself as a racing man who happened to build road cars to fund his obsession. He was famously indifferent to the road car side of his company. Reportedly, he never drove a Ferrari road car himself. His racing team, Scuderia Ferrari, was his life's work, the prancing horse on a red car. The sound of a Ferrari engine at full throttle on the Mulsanne Straight. That was what mattered. Ferrari had won Le Mans in 1960, 1961, 1962, 1963, 1964, and 1965. 6 consecutive victories. A dominance so complete that other manufacturers had largely stopped trying. Aston Martin tried, Jaguar tried, Maserati tried. All of them eventually walked away. Ferrari didn't walk away. Ferrari owned Le Mans, and Henry Ford II, sitting in Dearborn, Michigan, reading the European motorsport press, decided he wanted to take it from them. The deal that started a war. The year is 1963. Ford's internal market research tells them something interesting. Young American buyers are increasingly attracted to European sports cars: Ferrari, Porsche, Alfa Romeo. The image of European motorsport is influencing American purchasing decisions. Henry II's solution is elegant in its simplicity. Don't compete with Ferrari, buy Ferrari. Ford's executives make contact with Enzo's business representatives. The offer is significant, approximately $18 million, which in 1963 is an enormous sum. Ford's proposal is structured to be attractive. Enzo keeps operational control of the racing team. The road car business comes under Ford's financial umbrella, and the Ferrari name continues unchanged. On the surface, it makes perfect sense for both parties. Ferrari gets financial stability. Ford gets prestige and racing heritage overnight. Negotiations proceed for weeks. Ford sends a delegation to Maranello, Ferrari's home in the Italian countryside near Modena. The meetings go well. Documents are prepared. Lawyers on both sides are satisfied. Then Enzo reads the fine print. The contract includes a clause giving Ford final approval over the racing budget. Another clause restricting which races Ferrari can enter without Ford's authorization. A third clause giving Ford veto power over hiring decisions within the racing team. Enzo Ferrari stops reading. What Ford is proposing, in Enzo's view, is not a partnership, it is a purchase. Ford wants to own Scuderia Ferrari, the racing team, not just the road car company. They want to control the decisions that Enzo had controlled his entire life. According to people who were present, Enzo didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He simply stood up, told the Ford delegation that the deal was finished, and asked them to leave his factory. As they were leaving, and this moment has passed into motorsport legend, Enzo reportedly told a translator to convey the following message: that Henry Ford II was a fat son of a bitch, that Ford made ugly cars, and that Henry II was not worthy to carry his name. Whether those exact words were said is disputed. What is not disputed is that Henry Ford II received a message from Italy that the deal was dead, that Enzo Ferrari had terminated the negotiations, and that the reason given was that Ford's terms were insulting to a man of Ferrari's standing. Henry Ford II's response was immediate and absolute. He called a meeting in Dearborn. He told his executives, "We are going to Le Mans, and we are going to beat Ferrari, and we are going to keep beating Ferrari until they understand what they walked away from." The GT40 project officially begins in the spring of 1963. Building the weapon. The early years. Ford's first decision is a smart one. They don't try to build the car from scratch. They go to England. Eric Broadley is a British engineer running a small company called Lola Cars. In 1963, Broadley has already built something remarkable. The Lola GT, a mid-engine sports car powered by a Ford V8. It is small, low, aerodynamically advanced for its time, and fast. Ford buys the rights to use Broadley's work as a foundation and brings him into the project. A new facility is established in Slough, England. Ford Advanced Vehicles. The team is a mix of British engineers and Ford personnel from Dearborn. The car they design will be called the GT40. GT stands for Grand Touring. 40 refers to the car's overall height, 40 inches, just over a meter. Low enough that a tall man has to crouch to look at the roofline. Low enough, famously, to slide beneath most dining tables. The specifications are genuinely radical for 1964. The engine sits behind the driver, a mid-engine layout that European constructors had been using, but American manufacturers had barely explored. The chassis is a monocoque, a single structural shell, not a traditional frame. The body is shaped in a wind tunnel, with a low nose and a fastback roofline designed to cut through air at 200 miles per hour. The engine is a Ford V8, displacing 4.2 liters in early specification, producing over 350 horsepower. That power goes through a Colati transaxle gearbox mounted at the rear, another design borrowed from European practice. On paper, the GT40 is everything it needs to be. On track in 1964, it is a disaster waiting to happen. The problem is aerodynamic instability at very high speed. The Mulsanne Straight at Le Mans is nearly 6 kilometers of flat-out running. Cars routinely exceed 300 kilometers per hour, 190 miles per hour, on this section alone. At those speeds, the early GT40 develops lift. The front of the car rises, the rear becomes unstable. Test drivers report the sensation of the car trying to fly. Not metaphorically, the nose physically rises off the tarmac at speed. One test session at the Mulsanne ends with a GT40 becoming briefly airborne at 185 miles per hour. The 1964 Le Mans race arrives anyway. Ford enters 3 GT40s. The fastest qualifies well. The race is a different story. All 3 cars retire before midnight. Gearbox failures, overheating, one crash. The car that was supposed to embarrass Ferrari doesn't even see the morning of the second day. Ferrari wins. Again. 1965 arrives. Ford improves the car significantly. A new engine specification, revised aerodynamics, better reliability data from extensive testing. The GT40 Mark I enters Le Mans with real hope. Ferrari wins again. The GT40s are faster in qualifying, but in a 24-hour race, speed over 1 lap means nothing if the car breaks down after 8 hours. The press in Europe is not kind. One Italian newspaper runs a headline that translates roughly as, "Ford's expensive toy breaks again." An American journalist writes that Ford has proven that money cannot buy motorsport competence. Henry Ford II reads everything. He doesn't respond publicly. Internally, he makes a phone call. The call goes to a man in California. Shelby enters the picture. Carroll Shelby is already one of the most significant figures in American motorsport by 1965. He won Le Mans in 1959 as a driver, an achievement that remains remarkable because Shelby was driving despite a heart condition that should have kept him out of racing entirely. He won anyway. Then a doctor told him his racing career was over, so he became a constructor. The Shelby Cobra, a British AC-Ace chassis fitted with a Ford V8, is by 1965 one of the fastest road cars in America and a terror in racing. Shelby understands, better than almost anyone, how to make an American V8 work within the context of a precision racing machine. More importantly, Shelby knows how to manage a racing program. He understands the difference between having a fast car and having a car that finishes races. Ford gives Shelby operational control of the GT40 project for 1966. The budget expands. Shelby American, his California operation, becomes the center of the effort. Shelby's assessment of the existing GT40 is direct. The car is fundamentally sound but is being asked to do something it isn't built for. The Ford Advanced Vehicles team has been trying to make the existing engine reliable. Shelby's view is different. Make a bigger, more powerful engine and build the rest of the car around it. The result is the GT40 Mark II. The engine grows to 7.0 liters, a massive Ford FE big block V8. In race specification, it produces 485 horsepower. Some accounts say closer to 500 in practice. The car weighs more than the original GT40. The bigger engine, stronger gearbox, and additional cooling equipment add significant mass. But it is reliable. And it is fast in a way that the earlier cars were not just fast in the way that requires careful management, but fast in the way that punishes competitors who try to keep pace. 10 miles. The tragedy within the triumph. The story of the 1966 Le Mans has a shadow that most casual retellings leave out. Ken Miles is 47 years old when he races at Le Mans in 1966. He is not a glamorous figure. He is a working racing driver, a development engineer, a practical man who communicates with engineers in technical language and who has spent years at Shelby American, making the GT40 faster and more reliable than Ford Advanced Vehicles managed to make it. After Le Mans, Miles continues, testing the next generation of GT40, the Mark IV, which will race in 1967. He is testing at Riverside International Raceway in California on August 17, 1966, less than 2 months after his Le Mans second-place finish. The car suffers a catastrophic failure at high speed. Miles is killed instantly. He is widely regarded by those who knew him as the finest driver in the GT40 program, and by some accounts, one of the greatest American racing drivers of his era. He never received the mainstream recognition that other drivers of comparable talent achieved, partly because his career was spent in sports cars rather than Formula One. The 2019 film Ford vs. Ferrari, released as Le Mans 66 in some markets, tells his story. Christian Bale's portrayal introduces Miles to a generation of viewers who had never heard his name. Carroll Shelby is played by Matt Damon. The real Shelby, who died in 2012, always said that losing Ken Miles was the worst moment of the GT40 program. Not the early failures in 1964 and 1965. Not the political complications with Leo Beebe. Losing Ken Miles. Dominance. 3 more years. Ford does not stop at one victory. The 1967 Le Mans sees the introduction of the GT40 Mark IV, a new car designed by Shelby American's chief engineer Phil Remington, specifically for Le Mans. It is larger, heavier, and more aerodynamically sophisticated than the Mark II. The engine is the same 7.0-liter Ford V8, but in revised specification producing over 500 horsepower. Dan Gurney and A.J. Foyt take the #1 entry and lead from early in the race. Ferrari has redesigned their challenge around the 330 P4, Enzo's direct response to the 1966 humiliation. The P4 is beautiful, fast, and genuinely competitive. The 1967 race is closer than 1966, but not close enough. Gurney and Foyt win. They cover 3,251 miles in 24 hours at an average speed of 135 miles per hour, a distance record at Le Mans that stands for years. Ferrari's best car finishes third. Gurney does something spontaneous on the podium that enters motorsport legend. He shakes the champagne, aims it at the crowd, and sprays it. It is, by most accounts, the first time a racing driver sprays champagne at Le Mans. The tradition that every racing driver in every series practices today starts with Dan Gurney and a Ford GT40 on the Le Mans podium in 1967. After 1967, the FIA changes the regulations. Engines above 3.0 liters are banned from the prototype class. The dominant big block GT40S can no longer race under the rules they were built to exploit. But the GT40 story is not finished. Ford has been running a parallel program, a smaller, lighter GT40 with a 5.0-liter engine, designed to compete in the GT class rather than the prototype class. This car, the GT40 Mark I in revised specification, is taken over by John Wyer's team, Gulf Research Racing Company, funded by Gulf Oil and running in the iconic orange and blue Gulf livery that becomes one of the most recognized color schemes in motorsport history. The Gulf GT40 is a different machine from the big block cars of 1966 and 1967. It is lighter, more nimble, and engineered for reliability above outright speed. John Wyer's team is methodical in the same way Shelby's team was methodical. Nothing goes into the race car without extensive testing, nothing is left to chance. Le Mans, Gulf GT40 number 9, driven by Pedro Rodriguez and Lucien Bianchi, wins the race outright. Not just in class, overall, against all comers including much newer prototype machinery. Ferrari is absent from 1968. They have withdrawn their works effort following a period of internal restructuring and tragedy. Bandini was killed at Monaco in 1967. The Ferrari that everyone expects to return has not returned. Le Mans, the same Gulf GT40 program. Jackie Ickx, a young Belgian driver who will become one of the greatest Le Mans competitors in history, qualifies on pole position in a newer car. But the race comes down to a battle between Ickx's newer prototype and the older Gulf GT40 of Jackie Oliver. Ickx and Oliver swap positions throughout the final hours. The race is decided by the gap between them at the flag. The GT40 finishes first by a margin of approximately 100 meters, one of the closest finishes in Le Mans history. The same chassis number 1075, has now won Le Mans in both 1968 and 1969. It is the only car in Le Mans history to win consecutive years with the same chassis number. 4 consecutive victories: 1966, 1967, 1968, 1969. Ferrari's 6-year dynasty has been replaced by Ford's 4-year dynasty. And unlike Ferrari, who achieved their dominance with a team of Italian factory cars and drivers, Ford's final 2 victories came from a small privateer team running on Gulf oil money. The GT40 was not just fast, it was indestructible. The road car, a final insult to Ferrari. While the racing program is producing 4 consecutive Le Mans victories, Ford is doing something on the road car side that Ferrari genuinely does not anticipate. They sell GT40s to the public. To qualify for GT class racing regulations, Ford needs to produce a minimum number of road-going versions of the car. The road-going GT40 is not a watered-down version built to satisfy a rulebook. It is essentially the race car, modified only as much as is necessary to be legally driven on public roads. The interior is fitted with carpet and a small amount of sound deadening. Not much. The engine is detuned very slightly from full race specification. The car still has no storage space, no practical luggage capacity, and requires its driver to lower themselves into a cockpit barely 40 inches above the ground. It is not a comfortable car, it is not a practical car, it is a race car that happens to be road legal. It sells for approximately $18,500 in 1966. The number is not coincidental. It is essentially the same figure Ford offered to buy Ferrari in 1963. Only 107 road-going GT40s are produced across the entire production run. Today, an original road-going Ford GT40 sells at auction for between $5 and $11 million, depending on specification, provenance, and whether the specific car has any racing history. A GT40 that actually raced at Le Mans in 1966 would likely exceed those figures significantly. The car built to destroy Ferrari on the racetrack became one of the most valuable collector cars in history. Ferrari continued producing road cars throughout this period, more of them more successfully, building the brand that exists today. But the GT40 became something different, a fixed point in automotive history, a car that exists in a category of its own. The human story, what it cost. The GT40 victory of 1966 cost more than money. Enzo Ferrari, watching from the pit lane, loses something that day that he cannot fully recover. The mythology of Ferrari, the idea that an Italian racing team, built on passion and precision, was simply better than any industrial competitor, is broken. Ferrari wins Le Mans again in later years. The 312 PB is competitive in the early 1970s. In modern Le Mans, Ferrari's recent return with the 499P has produced victories. But the unbroken dominance of the 1960s, 6 consecutive wins, is gone from the moment the 3 GT40S crossed the line in 1966, and it never fully returns in the same form. For Carroll Shelby, the GT40 is a personal validation. He is a man who had to give up driving due to a heart condition. He spent the rest of his career proving that he could build what he could no longer drive. The 1966 victory at Le Mans, the race he won as a driver in 1959, is proof. The old man from Texas, who was told he could no longer race, built a team that went to Europe and beat everyone. For Henry Ford II, the GT40 program is exactly what he needed. Ford's image changes, not just in motorsport, but in showrooms. The Mustang, launched in 1964, is already selling in extraordinary numbers. The GT40 victories give the Mustang's performance image a credibility that no advertising campaign could manufacture. Young buyers who would never own a GT40 buy Mustangs because they want something connected to that feeling. Henry II achieves exactly what he set out to achieve in 1963. Ferrari's insult is answered. The image of American cars in Europe changes permanently. The legacy, 50 years and counting. The GT40 story does not end in 1969. In 2003, Ford announces they are reviving the GT nameplate. The Ford GT, launched for sale in 2005, is a direct spiritual descendant, mid-engine, supercharged V8, built to evoke 1966. It is not a subtle car, it is an explicit tribute. The color options include the Gulf livery. The proportions reference the original. The press events are held at Le Mans. Then, in 2016, exactly 50 years after the original victory, Ford enters Le Mans, again with a new second-generation Ford GT, a mid-engine GT3 car with a twin-turbocharged EcoBoost V6. It wins its class. The podium celebration takes place directly in front of the Ferrari team garage. Ford's communications team describes the positioning as a practical decision based on available space. Le Mans veterans and motorsport journalists describe it differently. The image, a winning Ford GT celebrating in front of Ferrari's garage, 50 years to the day from the original victory, circulates immediately. Enzo Ferrari died in 1988. Henry Ford II died in 1987. The argument between them is resolved in motor racing records. 4 consecutive Le Mans victories for Ford, beginning in 1966, following 6 consecutive victories for Ferrari. The historical record is permanent. What the GT40 proves ultimately is that the story of a car can be more important than the car itself. There were faster cars than the GT40 in later years. There were more beautiful cars. There were cars more advanced in their engineering. But the GT40 was built out of fury. It was the physical manifestation of what happens when an insult meets an unlimited budget and 2 years of engineering obsession. That origin story is embedded in the car. Carroll Shelby, who had a heart transplant in 1990 and survived to the age of 89, always said the same thing when people asked him what the GT40 meant. He said, "We went to Europe. We played by their rules on their circuit in their conditions, and we beat them, not once, 4 times. He said, "That doesn't happen," except it did. The Ford GT40 is the last car of its kind, not because nothing like it was ever built again, but because the conditions that created it can't really be replicated. You need 2 men with unlimited stubbornness and enough resources to sustain their argument for years. You need a contract thrown on a floor in Maranello. You need a furious phone call from Dearborn. You need Carroll Shelby and Ken Miles and Dan Gurney and a 7.0-liter engine that sounds like the end of the world on the Mulsanne Straight. 4 Le Mans victories, one of the most iconic race liveries in history, a road car that now sells for $10 million, and somewhere in the motorsport record books, an entry that reads 1966 Ford, 1967 Ford, 1968 Ford, 1969 Ford, right after 6 consecutive entries that read Ferrari. Enzo Ferrari never publicly said what the GT40 meant to him. But in 1967, after the second consecutive defeat, he built the 330P4, the most beautiful racing car Ferrari had produced in years. Some people called it the most beautiful racing car anyone had produced in years. He threw everything at it. He finished second. If you want more stories like this, machines built out of fury and rivalry, and the kind of obsession that changes history, subscribe to Motor Vault TV. Hit the bell, we'll be back.